Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1996 biographical drama titled Shine. Now, Shine runs for 1 hour and 45 minutes long. It is directed by Scott Hicks. It is produced by Jane Scott. The script was done by Jan Sardi. The score was done by David Hirschfelder, the cinematography by Jeffrey Simpson, and the editing was done by Pip Carmel. And the stars of the movie are Geoffrey Rush, who, of course, to popular culture, you may know him as Captain Barbossa from the Pirates of the Caribbean series. Yes, he stars in this. He actually won an Oscar for his performance. So yeah, he's in this movie. We also have Armin Mueller-Stahl, who was Oscar nominated in the Best Supporting Actor category. So this is a real Oscar caliber movie here. What we're seeing here today. Let's see. Rounding out the cast, we have a longtime British actress, the late great Lynn Redgrave. We also have another legend here in this movie. We got John Gielgud, who is still churning out movies even in his 90s. Yeah, he was still dishing out some great performances. I mean, this guy is a stage actor to the end. He's been in the biz since forever, and he still can churn out some really good performances even through the twilight years of his life, which is pretty amazing. Let's see what else we have. We have Noah Taylor, we have Googie Withers, Justin Brain, Sonia Todd, Nicholas Bell, Chris Haywood, and Alex Rafalowicz. Just get myself adjusted here. Okay. Well, if there are any faults to the 1996 Australian film Shine, is that it is taken under control of a narrative that is at times very cliched. Also, pretty sketchy are the sequences of events writer director Scott Hicks puts into the film. But still, the film is saturated with sheer brilliance, and it tells the tale of a piano genius named David Helfgott, who would be played in three different actors. As a child, he's played by Alex Rafalowicz, and then as a teenager to young adult, Noah Taylor, and then finally to full blown adult, middle aged adult, played by Geoffrey Rush. We chronicle his story from the time he was a child to a troubled young soul to an out of it adult, and it was played off of nothing short of brilliance. This was a very engaging story. It was not told in a linear perspective. I mean, we're going to be seeing, like tidbits of his childhood past. We're going to see tidbits of his youth and we'll also have emphasis to him as an adult. But it's not going to be linear. It's going to be like little samplings here and there. But the story is executed and we get to really delve quite naturally into the characters, and it flows very well too. We first see Helfgott's problem. Yes, David Helfgott, although maybe a piano impresario, he is also a very troubled individual. Not troubled as in like a delinquent, troubled being that he might be somewhat uh, special needs in many areas. I mean, there's a possibility that he might have like schizophrenic, and he might be delusional almost to the point of being almost like a savant, so to speak. So we first see Helfgott's problems stemming from his father, who was a Holocaust Polish Jewish born Australian immigrant by the name of Peter Helfgott, played by German actor Armin Mueller-Stahl, who was a very domineering father in nature as he continually subjugates him, which at times can be a bit over the top, but still very compelling to watch. Um, we see the opening scenes where a young David was entering a music concert or a music contest or a talent show. And when he was playing the piano, he was playing it to sheer brilliance. But instead of, like sticking around to collect the prizes, his controlling father, who was there in the audience, takes him home right away before, the judges had a chance to bring home the prizes. We are led to believe that David did not win this contest, but as it turns out, he was the best talent in this talent show. And that, he believes that, and the judges believe that this kid has a gift that should neither be wasted or be under the control or the confines of everyone. However, though his father Peter does not want him to shine or does not want him to go through um go through to seek higher training for his piano skills. And every time we all think that David is not good, he isn't good. He is grand. But his father completely continually deprives him of him achieving greatness at every chance he gets. And we can't there's just a lot of Peter Helfgott that we don't like about him. I mean, he's always holding him back of opportunities to shine, hence the title. And every time David has a chance to achieve something, Peter holds him back. He often tells him a story that, he wanted to be a musician as well and to play the violin. But his father crushed his dreams by taking the violin and snapping it with his knees. Now, maybe that might be easy to break a violin, but obviously Peter can't break a piano. So therefore, the only thing he could do is just stop him from trying to achieve his goals. So then you have an older Peter, played by Noah Taylor, in his teens to 20s, once again continuing to shine as a great piano player. And when it came time for him to enroll, he got accepted to go to America to get further training in the piano. But his father would not let him. And whenever David did not listen or obey, Peter would be very abusive. So it was kind of like, so in some ways there's some ways where you could just wish you could just choke the life out of Peter Helfgott. But then there are times when you have to sort of take a step back and say, maybe this guy is probably just as traumatized as David. So then you're like, let's not be hasty, or let's not pass our judgments with our hands and pass our judgments and draw our conclusions with our heads. Let's be logical. Let's think about these things. Let's think about it before you could just dismiss Peter Helfgott as a one-dimensional ogre. Let's take our times and to say and to think that maybe this guy is a troubled soul. So then, um, uh, David gets another letter from England, and in England, he got accepted to take piano lessons in England. And this was another golden opportunity for David to show his talents, his gift. And once again, Peter did not let him. Only this time, David, instead of listening to his father, he took the courage to listen to himself. So he went off to England, much to the chagrin of Peter, who eventually decided that if you leave this house, you will never be welcome back here again. So David decides to take the risk, go to England, but at the cost of being disowned by his father. And this is where he begins a teacher-student relationship with his teacher, Dr. Cecil Parks, played by John Gielgud. And the main piano piece that is the main emphasis is Rachmaninoff's piano piece, which many people claim is the most hardest, most complex piano piece there is. I mean, it's something that would put Mozart and Beethoven to shame. Rachmaninoff's Opus 3, I think it's what it is. I'm not sure. I don't fully remember it. I don't fully remember the title, but I mean I know what the main focus or the main emphasis is, and that is the one that many people are often puzzled as to why is that particular song the most complex piano piece there is. Makes you often question about that. You know, even his own teacher was kind of taken aback by it. So one day he was like playing the piano, and all of a sudden, he started getting more and more hyperventilating, and the sweat was pouring down his head. His long hair was getting wet and sweaty, and then all of a sudden the guy just suffered a nervous breakdown, which led him to be institutionalized for the next 15 years. But then 15 years had passed. He became, I guess, a free man. And then he went into I guess you could say a tavern, or where he eventually played to sheer brilliance, and then finally he was back on stage again. And, he grew to exceptional fame, even to the point where his father wanted to come out to congratulate him. And then we come to the final scene where he and his wife, who was an astrologer, came over to the site of his father's grave. And that's kind of like pretty much how the movie ends. But it was really, really good, well executed, very character driven, and it's really, really a very compelling uh, film to watch. If you're into like classical music, or if you want to study, the mind of a schizophrenic, or maybe a possible autistic savant who could achieve quite the goals that they wish to pursue, and to show the worlds that even though he may be mentally challenged, there is that does not necessarily mean that he is stupid. But I think what really makes this movie work a lot is the fact that it's really believable, even though there's a lot of dramatization and there's a lot of hyperbole. Remember, this is a movie, this is not a documentary. And of course, you're probably going to say that there's going to be a lot of artistic license in here, which means that there's going to be a lot of exaggeration and a lot of half truths to full lies. But you got to remember, this is all just through creativity in storytelling. Maybe the whole story about David Helfgott is a complete fabrication, or only just filled with semi-truths, but not the complete picture. Now I understand, like I said, this is a biopic and not a documentary, so there's bound to be some sort of dramatization. But it's hard because it's like it's hard to fully admit it or not if Peter Helfgott was really that cruel to David. According to Maureen Helfgott, who wrote a book about the real truth of David Helfgott, it has actually been confirmed that her father was actually very supportive of David, and that Peter Helfgott and him kept in contact throughout, and that he was more encouraging to David, even though he was still kind of weary and concerned because of his mental health. And that, David Helfgott, as much as I don't want to sound cynical, but David Helfgott was not really as a super piano player as what's portrayed in the movie. He's good, but he's not excellent. And of course, there's also been saying that Rachmaninoff piece that seems to be somewhat boggles the minds of all great piano players in this movie. It's not really that hard of a piece to play. I'm not no piano prodigy myself. I'm not a piano prodigy. I mean, all I'm doing is just picking up information as I go along when I do these uploads. And that it's not that complex. This is just from what I've read. But nevertheless, it's impossible that this cruelty can ever be erased from David's mind, and any kind of burden would be difficult to climb. I mean, and I don't even think David's mental health could also stem from Peter's abuse. Maybe he was just born this way. So Shine kind of, transitioned towards David youth to adult years, which would be from Noah Taylor eventually to Geoffrey Rush, where he gets the right training and the musical, and he has legions of friends helping him along the way. We see him succeed through his music to the point where he suffers a nervous breakdown, which leads him to 15 years institutionalized. However, once he's released, he comes back to playing great music in front of packed crowds, and we as an audience, we just want nothing more than to cheer for his return as he was able to fight his way back to the top. There's a lot of quality behind it, and it works very, very effectively. In some ways, the format may feel very much like a sports film. You know, yeah, it's got a bit of a formulaic twist, like in a lot of sports films, but it's still very good in quality. We have the underdog musician. Like in sports movies, we have the underdog athlete, with potential for greatness, and then something kind of lures them away. So then eventually they have to climb or go that extra mile just to try to be the best that they could be. David Helfgott's movie is no exception. He had to go through many burdens, including his tyrannical father, to being institutionalized, to, to reaching his full potential, to finally get back to doing what he does best and to achieve greatness. Even though, underdog stories in movies are quite predictable, and this movie here is formulaic and predictable. But why this one is orchestrated this way is simply because it works. The story is easy to follow through and never cowers away from scenes that can be at times unpleasant for the eyes. When you see Peter beating up his son and then disowning him, and then the final scene where you see Peter at his grave, you think for a second, wow, this is an emotional tearjerker. The flow actually of the story just runs very naturally. The complexities regarding Peter's fathering towards his son and David's musical skills can be quite layered and compelling to watch. If there was a weakness to Shine, it would be that the three stages of his life seemed to just skim over and didn't have a complete disclosure behind it, while the interesting scenes seemed to somewhat usurp the dramatic scenes. Like we could have liked to have seen a little more disclosure in a few scenes as time goes on in the movie. We don't get to experience it that much. We're like, why stop there? Why not just continue on? Why did you stop? I wanted to see more. I wanted to, before you segue into another scene, why not just finish off this scene and then move on to another stage? That's kind of like where the biggest weakness is, which at times could feel a bit unfulfilling. The transformation between a sensitive kid with a quirky persona to the fragile eccentric can be complex in detail as the life struggles David faces. We aren't fully invested because that happens right from the early parts of the movie. we know his capabilities are right there. In a character driven movie, we should always sort of take the time to see the development of the characters. Not just, like put us on the spot abruptly and make us guess. This is a character driven film. If you want to just put something in right away with no waste of time, you should do that for an action movie. This is not an action movie. This is a biopic drama. So we need more time to invest into the characters. Performance wise, the acting is really good. I mean, Geoffrey Rush is the rightful person to win the Oscar, but his role is somewhat oddly selected due to the character being the ones that you've seen many times before. The remaining cast members range from solid acting to just going through the routines that Hollywood seems to favor. Aside from that, they play off the more natural performances, Rush's acting abilities to grasp at David's incoherent quirks and limited attention span. You see, this is actually one of the main idiosyncrasies that make the character of David Helfgott original. Being to the fact that, in a conventional Hollywood performance, everyone speaks in a clear voice. Even Dustin Hoffman's character, Raymond Babbitt, who is just as autistic as David, maybe even worse. And even though he's got kind of like these repetitive quirks and slurs, in the case of Geoffrey Rush's character of David Helfgott, we actually see a guy who at times you can barely understand what he's grasping at. He stutters, he stammers, and the things that he says at times teeter on incoherent. In fact, he may be a guy of a lot of words, but a lot of it doesn't make sense. But then once he gets behind the piano, you're just taken away from it. But at least, his over the top characteristic doesn't, like upstage the supporting cast. I mean, like I mentioned before, Armin Mueller-Stahl is just as engaging to watch as Geoffrey Rush's character. And, also, hey, we got to give hats off to John Gielgud, who was like well into his 90s and could still pull off a great performance. I mean, this is like probably near one of his last performances before his death in, what was it, 1999, 2000? I don't remember. Yeah, and hey, the guy was still managing to pull off some compelling performances. Whereas, like if you're an elderly individual, you're just gonna be like thrown in as a background character just to prove that you're not dead. Well, John Gielgud didn't still manage to put out a great performance as one of the more respected uh, actors in the world. Noah Taylor deserves also some credit for his emotional character of a younger David Helfgott, and he deserved also an Oscar nominee. He looked like he could have been in the category of Best Supporting Actor as well. This was really character driven, and the performances really, really shined. No pun intended. Or maybe it was intended. Oftentimes Hollywood likes their communications to be delivered in a very crisp way. Very few people grasp or pause for words. It's all delivered straight and to the point, and that's very acceptable. When a typical off camera conversation comes on camera, it takes the tone aback while the wheels are turning. But what makes Rush's performance stand out is that we see a personality that is fractured, that's contrary to the normal behavior from his peers. So the whole film may be Oscar inclined, but through Rush's acting, this film is truly worthy to watch. I would highly recommend anybody who likes to see these kind of movies, biopics. Like I say, if you wish to see the real story of Maureen Helfgott's book about the real David Helfgott, maybe you could also read about that as well to get a more in-depth look at David Helfgott. If you want to know the real truths, or if you don't want to know about the truths about David Helfgott and you just want to see an exciting, character-driven movie about one person's struggles to make it to the top, just to get some insight and some inspiration, then I strongly recommend you to tune into the 1996 movie Shine. If I was to give this score, if I was to give this a score out of 10, I would give Shine from 1996 an 8. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.